Hi, welcome to the second video in this series where I present to you the theory of teaching and methodology and where I show you how I use my experience as a teacher on the mats. In the first video I talked about the characteristics of a good lesson, so that having a clear structure and planning your lesson in advance is one of the most important aspects of having a successful lesson. This video will focus on the principles that I use when I plan my lessons and make my lesson planning. In the end, having a good lesson, a successful lesson, and a lesson where people actually learn something should not be something where you are just lucky. It should be something that you did with intention. To do that, I have several reasons. Again, these are not something that I came up with. That's just teaching 101. But it is true for each topic, each subject, and for whoever you're going to teach to, because teaching and learning is universal. So you should have a goal-oriented approach that makes it more systematic what you're teaching, and your teaching has a goal in mind, which makes it easier for people to follow your teaching. Especially when we talk about grappling, people are not there on a regular basis. Sometimes they have to skip a class due to their family or to work, or they are simply sick. And by having some goals in mind, a general goal at the end of a longer training cycle, they know what they are in for in the next lessons. And in the end, we are teaching individuals in a group setting. Grappling is an individual sport, and we try to teach it in a group setting, which makes it difficult. But if you plan correctly, you can allow for the freedom that each individual needs in your lessons. If you do not plan your lessons, there are several risks that come with it. If you have not a goal at the end of a longer training cycle, then it's difficult to actually make any progress or to have any visible progress, because people do not know which steps they took towards a certain goal. So sometimes you even forget about certain aspects because you're jumping from one topic to another topic to another topic instead of sticking with one topic or one goal. It also might lead to you using different methods too much and underusing other methods. You might use drills that simply don't make sense because you're not aware of what your goal is. You cannot really gear the drills towards that goal. This will then lead to a wasted time for your students because they are doing things that do not really help them progress on their path to become a proficient grappler. And by the end, that will leave them unhappy because they do not see any progress, they lose their motivation, and soon will leave or stop coming as frequently, which obviously is a big problem if you want to have happy customers. There are several advantages of planning your lessons. In the end, you should have a goal in mind that is a long-term goal. And each lesson should help to achieve that goal. So each lesson should be a step towards that goal. By explaining this to your students and showing them which step they are going to take, it helps them to see their own development, and it helps you as a coach to judge their development because you know what you want them to do, and then you can better judge if they're actually doing what you want them to do. I said at the beginning that by planning you create the space you need for individual and free exploration of grappling. This seems to be contradictory, but in the end, if you plan, you set boundaries in which people can then freely explore grappling. I will get into further detail of that in one of the future videos. If you are planning your lessons correctly, you are also, or you enable yourself to be more spontaneous, because you know if the thing that you are going to change in your lesson is still geared towards the goal or not. Simply just being spontaneous is not good in itself. Being spontaneous in making the right decisions in order to achieve the goal that you have in mind, that is what good teaching is. If you're new to teaching, having a plan also helps you to feel safe and to be secure and to actually perform better in front of a crowd. Everybody who has been there and taught their first lesson knows how difficult it can be if you do not have a plan and you're not quite sure what you are going to do. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But if you actually know what you're going to do and you know that you have the knowledge and everything set up well, then you feel more confident and people enjoy the lesson more. If you're going to plan, you should have some underlying principles in place that help you actually judge if your plan is going to be successful or not. First of all, you need a curriculum. As I said, you need a long-term goal. This can be based on techniques, on concepts or skills. In the end, it should be a mixture of the three. Techniques are the knowledge that you have to present to your students, as well as concepts, and skills have to be developed over a certain time. You yourself as a coach need a deep understanding of the topic so that you can break down techniques and concepts and skills into smaller pieces that are easier to digest by your students. You should be aware of the time frame. Is it a goal that you have in mind for annual progress, a monthly progress, a weekly progress, or your daily lesson? You should also keep in mind how different lessons relate to each other. How is one lesson building on the other lesson? Where in your lesson plan is that lesson? Is it something that you use at the beginning of your training cycle, or is it something that you use at the end of your training cycle? You should have different goals for different levels of students in your class. Again, there should be a low-hanging fruit that each and every student is able to reach, and there should be some more advanced goals for advanced students. You should try to find out which methods actually help your students to achieve the goal of the lesson, thus the goal of the training cycle. Not all methods are suited for the same for all goals. So you have to make individual decisions for different goals. You should always keep in mind the time that you are going to spend on certain drills and on the feedback that you give students, and especially how you will transition between different phases of your lessons. This is basically what a blueprint for a lesson looks like. First, you have a warm-up, which should not take too long. Then it should kind of lead into some introduction to the topic or introduction to the goal of this lesson. Then you have an instruction phase where you make sure that everybody understands what the goal of the lesson is and why it is the goal and why it makes sense to have this goal, which then will lead into some sort of progressive drilling with some feedback. This is something that you might have to repeat a couple of times depending on how you're drilling and what you're drilling. And in the end, you will have the most fun part of the class, and that's obviously the rolling. I will talk about how each step is contributing to a successful lesson in the upcoming videos. And then I will show what I mean by what the difference between a warm-in and a lead-in is, and why progressive drilling and feedback is something that has to be repeated multiple times in a lesson. So in the end, you should have a goal in mind and show people what that goal is, and be open about the different paths people then choose to walk towards that goal. So you, again, it comes down to you being somebody who helps people to become better grapplers. So it doesn't really matter if they choose the path that you have chosen, but you should be able to guide them on their path and help them not to lose sight of the goal, and to reevaluate from time to time if the path that they are walking on is still leading to that overarching goal. In the future videos, I will then show you how I plan lessons and how each part of a lesson is important for a successful outcome, and